Hey folks, John here, Old Hickory Forge. Welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. So, what's going on today? I'm out here in the workshop, and sitting behind me on the anvil, I got what I hope will be a pretty high-speed little bit of kit to review. If you haven't heard, Grizzly has come out with a new 2x42 knife grinder, and I got my hands on one, and we're going to see if it's any good. So if you want to check it out, stick around. Before we open this thing up, I want to go over the technical specs real quick. I'll leave a link down below to the Grizzly website where all the rigmarole and whatnot is, but I got the important stuff written down here. Price, right now, actually, at the time of this recording, it's on sale for $269 plus shipping. I paid $299 plus shipping when I bought this one. Now, they didn't send me this. I paid full price for this, so I don't have any promo codes or anything to offer you, so sorry. But after taxes and shipping and all that, it came out to just under $400. It was like $398 and some change, so just 400 bucks is what it's going to cost to get this thing to your door. It's a 110 volt motor, so this will run on your standard 110 volt household circuit. You don't need anything fancy. 3/4 horsepower, and it's variable speed, which is pretty cool. But anyway, like I said, I'll leave a link down below to the Grizzly website if you want to learn more about it, but that's the stuff that matters. So let's get this guy pulled out of the box. Moving right along, getting this thing up and running, there really isn't much at all you have to do in the way of assembly. All you got to do is connect that little hydraulic piston and bolt on the speed controller, and they include all the tools and fasteners you need to do that, so there really ain't nothing to it. One problem I am running into right off the bat is this tension knob right here that's supposed to tighten the tool rest. Can't actually clear the frame of the grinder, so you can't tighten this down as it is. Now, you can fix that by going in here and adjusting this screw to essentially adjust the starting position of that knob, but neither one of the Allen wrenches that they send you with it actually fits that screw right there, so you'd have to use one of your own, or you could just cut the end off of this knob so that it can rotate 360 degrees. For me, it's not that big of an issue. I don't know if it's a quality control problem with this particular unit, or if it's something everybody's going to run into, but I don't use a tool rest when I grind anyway, so for me, it's not that big a deal. Next thing I'm going to do before putting this guy into service is these steel guards around all the wheels. I'm going to get rid of those because they get in the way. They make changing the belt a pain. Now you can't grind against these wheels if you're trying to make finger grooves or get into a curve or something like that. So, also, I checked, this is a surface conditioning belt for my 2x72. I didn't get any for this particular machine, but there's just not enough clearance in between that wheel and that guard to run one of these. And these are handy in a lot of situations, and they're something you're going to want to be able to use. So if you ask me, you should take them off. They're there to help mitigate sparks, and also sometimes belts do break. It's not super common, but it does happen, and when one breaks going full speed, it's going to scare the crap out of you, and it's going to hit you, and sometimes if it hits your hand or something, it's not going to do any real damage, but you're going to have to stop and catch your breath for a minute before you can keep going. So if you want to leave them on, leave them on. I'm going to take them off, though. The guards on the platen wheels, as well as the drive wheel, look like they're just bolted on, so they'll come off pretty easily. The one on the tracking wheel, however, is welded on, so we'll need to take this whole thing off, take the wheel off, and then cut it off, but other than that, there really ain't nothing to it. Quick note, if you're taking your tracking mechanism off to cut the guard off, neither one of the included Allen wrenches will fit these little bolts in here, so you're going to have to use one of your own. Alright, we got all the guards taken off. Let's throw a belt on this guy and see how it does. This is the 120 grit silicon carbide belt that actually came with it, so kind of a crappy belt, but I guess it's better than not having one. So we got it turned on. We'll slowly start giving it speed. Check out the tracking. And now we'll turn it up to max speed and see how fast it goes. That's moving pretty good, actually. Quick note, this platen here is way too wide. Ideally, your platen would be exactly the same width as your belt, so you could use the edges of the belt to get good, clean plunge lines on your knives. And that kind of seems like what they've tried to accomplish with this little graphite plastic pad thing underneath the belt. A better way to do that would be to get you some high carbon blade steel or tool steel or something like that. Drill and tap some holes in it. Drill some holes in this so you can bolt it on from the back. And then heat treat it so you have a hard surface that's exactly as wide as the belt right under this thing, so it's going to stay nice and flat. You can also get glass platens. I don't care much for those personally because they do wear out. You know, they last a little longer than hardened steel, but they do wear out. And when they do, replacing them is a freaking nightmare. So if you ask me, hardened steel is the way to go. Maybe if you track the belt all the way to one side or the other, you can get by with what you got. And because we're only making one knife, we're just going to wing it. If you're more of a visual learner, here's kind of what I'm talking about as to how I would improve that platen assembly if I was going to do it. This is my Revolution 2x72. It's my main shop grinder. I use it every day. Basically, we have this platen bracket that has holes in it for these bolts, and then you take, you know, your hardenable steel wear plate, you drill and tap these holes, you heat treat it, and then you bolt that sucker on it, it's good to go. And whenever it wears out and it's not flat anymore, you can just take it off and make a new one. So if I was to improve upon that platen assembly, that's how I would do it. This is unrelated, but look how stinking adorable this thing is. You know, it looks so tiny compared to the full-size 2x72, you know. Just kind of neat. All right, boys, we're just about ready to get started. I got a high-tech bucket of water posted up, so hopefully we don't burn the shop down. The grinder has those little rubber feet on it that are supposed to help keep it from slipping when you push on it. If I was going to permanently put this thing into service, I would just take those off and permanently mount it to the table, but it'll be fine for what we're doing. We're going to take on a classic beginner knife making project to make a knife out of that horsehoof rasp. You can just take this and grind a knife out of it as is, but a better way to do it, in my opinion, is to anneal it in the forge first and then redo the heat treat. One, because that way it's going to be a lot softer for the grinding, and also because I like to do a differential heat treat on these. I just think a Hamon really makes them look a lot nicer, so that's the way I'm going to do it. Alright, so a rasp is annealed. We got some rough lines to follow drawn out. Normally at this point I would go to the portaband or something to remove a lot of the excess material before we actually hit the grinder. But I really want to see what this little guy's got, so we're just going to hog all that material off. I got it clamped down good, so we really should be able to lay into this thing and see how much power it's really got in that 3/4 horse motor. So I've been working on that blade blank for about 45 minutes now, and I gotta tell you, I'm not impressed. This thing's very underpowered, it bogs down very easily, the motor overheats very easily. I was having issues with the power being inconsistent, like it was slowing down and speeding up and slowing down and speeding up. It would work fine for about the first, 10 minutes or so, but then as the motor started to warm up and get tired, so to speak, it started being really inconsistent, and I thought maybe it was because I was using an extension cord, even though I was using a thick, high-quality contractor cord. So I brought it over here, plugged it into the wall after I'd let it cool off completely and tried again, and it did the same thing. It would run fine for about 10 minutes, and then it would start slowing down and speeding up and slowing down and speeding up. Also, the belt constantly moves back and forth because of how much slop there is in this tracking mechanism. They tried to kind of make up for it by adding this wing nut, so once you get your tracking set, you can tighten this down and give it a little bracing, and it does help some, but it's still very noticeable. Also, this platen piece they put on here, just after less than an hour of grinding, is already worn more than halfway through, so that's a total joke. Not doing too good. And a good question some people may have is, could you add a bigger, better, more powerful motor to this frame? And honestly, I don't know, because there's so little clearance all the way around. You would have to have one that fits this particular mounting style. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it would require, some significant modification. And for the amount of money and effort and time you're going to put into that, you'd honestly just be better off buying a better machine out of the gate. So this is what I was kind of talking about, the motor doing that pulsing thing after it runs for about 10 minutes or so. And right as I was filming that, we got an error message, and we got smoke coming out of the motor. So obviously that's not supposed to happen. We got a very strong smell of burning plastic, and the motor is very hot to the touch. I don't know if this thing's toast or not. I'm going to let it cool off and then plug it back in and see if it turns on. I've let this thing sit and cool off for about half an hour or so. We don't got the error message anymore, so let's see if it'll turn on. Oh, nope. As soon as I try to get the belt to spin, I get the error message again. Yep. It's doing nothing. I think she's toast, boys. So, needless to say, that's kind of disappointing. I did have high hopes for this machine. Here's about as far as we got on this blade blank before the sander called it quits. I am going to be finishing this out on the 2x72 off camera because I do owe the Patreon supporters a giveaway, and that was my intention with this project all along. So after I get done, going over my little outro spiel right here in my high-speed little notebook. Well, I'll finish this out off camera, and we'll do us a giveaway for the Patreon supporters. All right, you all know the drill. I got pros and cons and some final thoughts drawn out in my high-speed little notebook here. We'll give you the bad news first, go over the cons. First, the platen. The platen sucks. That little graphite sticker thing on the front of it, if you decide to purchase one of these, just rip that off and throw it away as soon as you get it. And then install either a hardened steel or a glass platen that's actually the correct width, and you're going to be much, much happier with it. Number two, the tracking. It looks like they really just used like a cabinet hinge or something to attach the tracking wheel mount, and it's really just very wobbly and not very solid. Now, mind you, the belt didn't fly off or anything like that. It just had a little bit of wobble to it, and if you don't mind kind of messing with that as you go, it's not the end of the world. And mind you, there are plenty of other people who have purchased this sander since it came out and say that theirs tracks perfectly, so it's possible that I just got a crappy one. For con number three, I put quality control. Keep in mind this is a mass-produced, made-in-China tool. I very highly doubt there's anybody inspecting each individual unit before it gets sent out. But from what I understand, Grizzly is pretty straightforward with their return and warranty policy, so in the event that I wanted to send this back or have it replaced, it probably wouldn't be that big of an issue. I've never had to deal with them myself, but that's just what everybody I've ever talked to about it has told me, so I have no reason not to believe it. Lastly, and most importantly, I put that it's underpowered. The motor overall seems to be the biggest weak point with this machine. It's very easy to overwork, very easy to overheat. You know, believe it or not, I was trying to be gentle with this machine. I know I said earlier that I really wanted to lay into it and see what it could do. But as soon as I started to give it a little bit of pressure, you know, at all, was when it started to cut out on me. So, you know, everybody online saying, I can't bog mine down. Well, you must not be pushing, like, at all. That or I just got a bad one from the factory. That's very possible. But anyway, I doubt it's a TEFC motor. I doubt it's rated for continuous duty. I know it's only 110 volts, so you're not going to get a super powerful machine. But there are much better, more powerful 110 volt motors out there. So that might be something worth looking into, you know, upgrading the motor. There might be a better one you could find that would fit the mount on that frame, or an adapter wouldn't be a super difficult thing to make. I'm sure it's possible if it's something somebody wanted to do, but something to keep in mind, you know, with all the time and effort and money that you're going to put into upgrading that sander, you know, where's the line of, I could have just got a 2x72. Now, the bad stuff's out of the way. Let's go over some pros. You know, even with the bad experience I had with the machine, I do think it has its merits. So first and foremost, it's 110. It's going to run on your standard 110 volt household circuit. So if you don't have 220 in your garage or shop, or if you're working outside off an extension cord, you know, somewhere where 220 is just not an option for you, this is something that's going to be able to run on that. Number two, it's variable speed. Now, variable speed is not absolutely necessary. You know, I learned to grind on a single speed grinder running 7,000 surface feet per minute, and I wasn't no worse for the wear. But now that I've had variable speed for a few years and I've seen how handy it is in a lot of situations like sharpening or grinding down bevels really thin on kitchen knives or doing fine polishing or working with exotic hardwoods that are really easy to burn. Also, that kind of brings me to another talking point I want to touch on. A lot of professional knife makers are talking about buying these little sanders and making them dedicated small wheel grinders, because to run a small wheel attachment, you absolutely do have to have variable speed. So there's something to be said for that. You know, it's not absolutely necessary, but now that I've had variable speed, I definitely don't want to go back to not having it. Number three, it tilts. That's kind of another thing. It's not absolutely necessary. I learned to grind without it, but now that I've had it, I definitely wouldn't want to go back to not having it. It comes in handy if you're working like on an axe handle or anything where you're trying to follow a long line, being able to tilt the sander and look at it as you go without having to bend way over to one side or something like that. That is really, really nice to have. Next on the pros list, it's better than a lot of other starter sanders. Whenever you get into knife making, bladesmithing, the most readily available and most affordable options out there are the little 1x30 belt sanders you find at Harbor Freight and places like that. And, you know, I have seen full-size swords made on those by people who have a lot more patience than I'll ever have. But if you're used to working with something like that and how slow and underpowered they are, something like this, even though it's much slower and more underpowered than even the cheapest 2x72, it's going to feel like a miracle machine compared to a 1x30, so there's something to be said for that. Last thing I put on the pros list is that it's affordable. Like I said earlier, this cost me just about $400 shipped to my door, and there's always kind of been a big gap in between the rungs on the ladder, so to speak, when it came to knife grinders. You know, you had your 1x30 way down here, you had your 2x72 way up here. So the idea of there being a middle-of-the-road option that would suit the hobbyist weekend warrior knife maker just fine, and also something that could be used as a stepping stone in a professional sense, you know, it's a good idea, and I do think if they improve the build quality and the power of the machine a little bit, it could be something worth having, you know, and it could make getting into this business a little more accessible for a lot of people, you know. You could start off with a 1x30 sander. The things that come off of that sander are going to pay for one of those. Things that come off of that sander are going to pay for a better one. So, you know, you climb a mountain one step at a time. You know, like when I got started blacksmithing, I started out with the infamous 55-pound Harbor Freight cast iron anvil. The work that came off of that one paid for a better one. The work that came off of that one paid for a better one. So on and so forth. So the philosophy of use of the machine is definitely there. I do want to talk a little bit more about the affordability comment. When it comes to 2x72 grinders, the DIY options out there are pretty much endless. There's lots of kits and plans and things like that you can buy. You could realistically make a far superior machine for really not very much more money at all. I actually reached out to Brian Housewort while I was making this video, and I asked him, hey Brian, you know, what's the cheapest Revolution 2x72 you could build and still have like a good quality, functional, powerful machine? And he says he has people who build them for as little as $600 or $800. And if you check out his YouTube channel, which I'll link below, he's got lots of videos on wiring up his grinders with cheap motors and cheap VFDs and lots of ways to save you money. So there's lots of options out there realistically if you're willing to do a little bit of work and get a little bit creative. You don't have to spend $3,000 or $4,000 for an off-the-shelf machine. And if you look back through my older videos from like 4 or 5 years ago, me and my buddy Eric, we built a 2x72. We used a 1 horsepower farm duty Harbor Freight motor, and we built a fully functional machine for around $400. Now, mind you, that was pre-COVID, and inflation wasn't nearly as out of control as it is now. But the principle kind of remains the same. If you're willing to do a little bit of work, you could build a much better machine for not a lot more money, so there's that. Quick note before we move into closing remarks. I know there's going to be at least one Yahoo going off in the comments about how you shouldn't have ran it with an extension cord. You didn't get enough amps. That's probably what messed up the motor. Well, that's a 15 amp cord on a 20 amp breaker for a motor that's only pulling 7.8 amps. And I don't know much about electricity, but I do know some of those numbers are bigger than the other ones. And I've also ran much more powerful machinery on that very same cord with no problem. So the cord's not the problem. If you're going to get in my comments going off with some nonsense like that, you can just go ahead and pound sand. So, is it something I recommend you spend your money on? I can't in all good conscience say yes, because you saw what happened to mine, and as more and more people get their hands on these sanders, it seems to be a relatively common problem, the motor's burning up. In my ever so humble opinion, it's better to just go ahead and save up and go for the 2x72, whether you go the DIY route or you buy an off-the-shelf unit, you know, buy once, cry once. That being said, I can't in all good conscience say no either, because it is possible that I just got a bad one. And for everybody online saying they burned up the motor, there's somebody else saying it's a great machine. You know, it'd be easy to go off on a rant and, you know, bash Grizzly and say it's a piece of crap and this and that and the other. But in my never-ending quest to help separate the sense from the nonsense, disingenuous is just something I'm not interested in being. One bit of advice that I will give you is if you do buy one of these, don't throw the box and the packing material away until you know if it's going to hold up or not, because I returned mine, and because I'd already thrown the box away, I had to pay the UPS people to pack it back up for me, and if you got the box, you wouldn't have that problem. But anyway, that's all I got for you if you're not a Patreon supporter. If you are a Patreon supporter, stick around, because we got a knife to give away. So here's the knife we're giving away. Kind of hard to get all the details on camera, but it's a pretty run-of-the-mill stock removal Farrier rasp knife. I did the differential heat treat. The Hamon actually came out pretty nice on this one. The blade's about 11.5 inches. I used a piece of black ironwood for the handle. The guard's made of another rasp. One cool thing is the way I put it together. I don't know if you can see or not. I was trying to mimic the look of a Loveless bolt. So this is, the tang is threaded. It's got threads welded on the end. And this is a brass threaded sleeve that screws on there and holds everything together nice and tight. Big thanks to my buddy Joseph Garrard of Garrard Forge and Tool, because whenever I got this idea, I was looking up like threaded brass bushings and this and that, and I don't know if that was a piece that existed somewhere and I just couldn't find it, but I told him what I wanted and what I was trying to do, and he made it happen. So big shout out to him, link to his Instagram below. But anyway, let's find a new home for this sucker. All right, you guys know the drill. All the Patreon supporters, your names are on our trusty wheelofnames.com. Let's pick us a winner. Edward. A guy with no last name, apparently. So, Edward, if you want the knife, it's yours. Just shoot me a message on Instagram or on Patreon. There will be a link to my email down below also if you want to get in touch with me there. Either way, just get a hold of me somehow and get me your shipping info, and we'll get this bad boy sent out to you. But that's all I got for you. If you like what you saw, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. I hope you got something out of this review. I hope you learned something. As always, we're sponsored by Lazy K Knife Supply. Here's actually a real nice block of desert ironwood they just sent me pretty recently. So there will be some discount codes down below if you're looking to get a hold of some top shelf handle material at a pretty reasonable price. If you want to stay up to date with the day-to-day goings on here at the shop, Instagram is the best place. That's where I'm the most active. But like I said, that's all I got for you, and y'all take care.